using self-reflection in online courses. All right. So I'm going to talk to you about how and why we should really be using self-reflection in our online courses. And my goals for this presentation is really to recognize why it is important, to show you a little bit about a practical side and the cycles and what they really should look like to have a rich feedback. Also to show you some best practices that you can use in your classrooms, and then some tools. And just so you guys know, I will be sending out, or Michelle will be sending out, a longer, even longer version of this lecture, where I put a bunch of different tools for you to do, not just like the regular journaling and things like that. So you can play around with those. All right, so let's think about self-reflection. Think about it. Why should we really use it? Because self-reflection is only a small part of reflective process and what it can do for us. So some of the biggest things we can have is it can transform a concrete experience into the abstract and vice versa. It can personalize and contextualize content that we're trying to teach our students. It also gives an opportunity for a student to question their own actions, values, and assumptions. See the big picture, not just focus on each little assignment, but how it really incorporates in their whole body of knowledge and experiences. The big aha moments, oh, I did that, I don't want to repeat that again. And we always want them to learn from their past mistakes. In fact, they're not mistakes if they learned something. And this is a great opportunity. As for instruction, we can document all their self-reflections, and we use it for suggestions for future students, for future content, and how we can build our courses better. But it's also good for them to see how they started something and where they are now in their knowledge. The two aspects that I am guilty of not using enough is using self-reflection for emotional and social support. We understand, especially right now, how difficult it is for students to connect to each other and to us in an online environment without the physical interactions. We need these reflection opportunities. We can use these reflection opportunities to create collaborative and personalized learning environments. We can, of course, facilitate their learning, and research showed when they are connected, it increases their learning and satisfaction. And students may gain knowledge and trust from such reflections. And when we talk about emotional and social support, this is not just I write a paper and I submit it to you and I never hear anything from you. We're talking about a dialogue reflection. We're talking about group reflections. So really using those aspects to enrich their environment. So let's think about what is self-reflection. And I really, when I read this, I was like, I'm not doing this correctly at some point. It is an active, intentional, and purposeful meaning-making process. Intentional and active are the two keywords I need to refocus on. So it's to perform in a disciplined manner at periodic intervals. So in some of my courses, I have them reflect at the end of the semester. Not a good idea. It should be in periodic intervals. Involves guided thinking about performance of a situation. And the goals are resolve problem, generating new perspective, exploring and discovering part of meditation. For the students to be so self-aware of, this is my learning process. This is how I think. This is why I think this. This is where this is coming from, and how does this affect what I'm doing? So I think that is a beautiful thing when it happens. So actual reflection process. A guy named Graham Gibbs in 1988 said there's a structure to this. And sometimes when we use self-reflection, I don't think we incorporate all these parts and make it as meaningful as it could be. So I think we all pretty much do, describe what happened, the description of the experience. And how do you feel? I think these two parts, at least I do very well. But then what was good and bad about experiences? Sometimes I don't like those words. I say what went well and what could be improved on. How did you feel about, against the benchmark, or like based on this benchmark, how well did you do? And then analysis. So the personalization, okay, did it make sense or not? Conclusion, this is what I learned, this improve on. An action plan. And for sure I'm missing this part. Okay, you felt about this experience happened, but what exactly are you going to do differently next time? Give me that list of steps rather than just leaving you in this loop. Oh, I made a mistake, this happened, and I felt bad about it. Okay, and is good. There's a toolkit, I left a link here, that does a wonderful cycle, and where it's like templates you can use for your classrooms, and it's really good. So when we think of the of self-reflection, we really should think of it as encompassing three domains. One is knowledge, the other one is self-awareness, and social connections. And then we focus a lot on knowledge. Of course, we wanted to increase the depth of knowledge and identify the areas of deficiency. But our goals should also be for the students to personalize and contextualize the knowledge and build connections. I can tell you my students have a very, very rough time connecting the dots. Provide comparative references. This is where those group reflections can work very well, where they're like, hey, I don't think like this, or I don't process like this. And of course, build social connection and self-awareness. So one of the great strategies or model you can use to identify areas of deficiency or increase the depth of what they're learning is the connect, extend, and challenge model. And this is the idea of the questions that you can use. Like, especially in those foundational courses, every time you learn something new, how did you connect it to what you already knew? How do you extend that? And then how do you challenge? So I think that's a great model to use for that. For personalize and contextualize, these are the aha moments and first base experience. I can tell you I had a class on pharmacology, which is exciting subject. I'm sure my students are thrilled, and I couldn't get them engaged. So what I did is I asked them, okay, have you ever had a medical experience which led to an unforeseen outcome, or was there a mistake or something? And they got hooked on that idea. And they described their firsthand knowledge. And then when I went into a content, how those things happen, it was much more personal. They were much more engaged. I saw the engagement go up. So same thing what happens with presentations. The students, the important aspect here is how they completed the project. How was their process? How they utilized the theories learned in class and made something concrete. And their peers see that, gain a new perspective. Well, we learned the same theory, but I thought about it differently, and I was going to do this differently. And this is very rich environment. So concrete context for other students. So definitely a good way. Progressive design and students to see the connections. As I said, my students have a very hard time connecting all the dots. And you can use this in several different ways. You can use this within individual assignments or as a semester way. In individual assignments, you'll divide them up, and a reflection is the last step of that individual assignment. Each of those parts are connected to your learning objectives. In option 2, each module makes up a big project in the end. I have a class that's built exactly like that. And when they put it all together, they have a reflection within those modules sometimes, and then at the end saying, oh, this is how everything fit in. I understood why it was broken up like that. I understand what this part went first. So this could be a great opportunity. So again, an example with the final assignment, demonstrates all the previous assignments, and reflection is embedded individual. One thing I want to point your attention to, if you're going to have that, sometimes you can have a summary table. So let's say you have 5 assignments that culminate together. You can have students have their reflection piece and a summary table of the big ideas. And at the end, they can look at just that summary table and go, this is how it fit. Okay, so here summarize the main ideas. Social connections. I don't think I do enough of this. So self-reflection is a product of social interactions. We need to give them opportunities to have those interactions in an online environment, and that could be through group discussions or through other discussions. Interactions with others reflect on the meaning derived from prior experiences. Definitely incorporate that. And awareness of cognitive conflict, verbalizing current understanding of a problem. I usually give them like a thought-provoking question where they'll have to argue itself. An initial perspective with justification for prior experiences and evaluation and then revision. So it's okay to have those social conflicts. It's okay to say to them, okay, now that you're aware of this problem, how are you going to contextualize and revise it? And improving self-awareness. They need to start with their own self-reflection about the subject, understanding their own emotions. And some of our students, including myself at times, are not in touch enough with their emotions to go, well, how do I feel about it after that initial anger over an issue or something, or the injustice? What are the real feelings? And we as a facilitator and the learner review the reflection together. So it's not just a paper they reflect on and give it to me, and then they don't hear anything from me. It's actual dialogue. My MHS farm class, we actually have a dialogue journal where they say something and then I always reply and we have that conversation. We identify their strengths and weaknesses, and we look for alternative ways that can be improved. An example, they got really bogged down looking for something, and I said, well, was this a strength or a weakness? A weakness. Okay, how will you go around it? And these are my suggestions as well. So it's sort of a dialogue journal, not just a one-off. And let's talk about how to do this well. So we need to provide structure. This is where we need to make sure that it's intentional structure activities at specific stages. So where can we put this in? We can actually have a reflection before a lesson where the students state their goals and make a personal connection with the subject. This is where hooking them with an idea usually works well. During a lesson, allows them to have like a moment of saying, this was an aha moment, and I need to down. I just had an aha moment. And I struggle with this because I'm like, I don't want to interrupt their flow of learning, but it can be done. And of course, after a lesson, which is we're used to, where we reflect on the journey and determine mastery or need for further help. And if they do need further help, do we have a mechanism set up to offer them more help, to offer them support? And we need to reflect on the learning process and decide if it worked for them. Encourage the 3 areas of reflection. So sometimes I think I am at least focused on one area where it should really be more. The actual academics, their own learning process, and then social and emotional. How did you feel about this? Like, what happened? Like, what was that happened for you? And we can have, when we talk about an example of doing reflection and academic progress, we can compare it to a well-established standard. So I don't have to tell you whether you did well or not. There's a standard, here it is, how did you do? And we want to identify individual weaknesses, self-awareness, and performance. Or you can rate your mastery. And the thing here is it sets up a mechanism. So if the rating mastery, let's say 1 star out of 5, would not recommend, it would trigger an instructor to intervene and suggest alternative or improvement or catch those students before it is bad. And write on their content. So they summarize in their own words. Don't quote me something. How did, let it come from you. So facilitators, and this really goes with the group reflections more than individual reflections, because we can fall into this habit. We are not a neutral participant in this. Our job is to interject new ideas and diagnose misconceptions. And we need to move those discussions, whether between just the student and us or the group, towards a resolution, not just leave them hanging. We should demonstrate what an effective reflection looks like. We can use VoiceThread or something and show them how we think out loud and work through a problem and work through our reflection. It shows them that we're vulnerable too. It builds that trust. We can also share excellent student example anonymously with permission and show them this is what I'm looking for. This is what type of reflection I'm looking for. Not just like, great job, thanks, I felt great. And we want to identify the central idea, hook those students to the subject, make it personal for them, get them involved, get them encouraged or excited about something. And of course, we need to review and feedback, and we need to be very supportive in this thing, and grading should be on completeness and not the quality of writing. So, the grammar police will have to take a step back for just this moment, and we focus on what they wrote. So let's example of an assignment reflection. At the end of each assignment, they can tell me the uniqueness or the most significant process of how they completed the process, lessons they learned, and the summary table, which I mentioned earlier. It serves very well also for them as a checklist if you have a lot of moving parts if they completed everything and they need to summarize. So we can say feelings and the summary. You can also use this for midterm and final courses. So of course we can have same things and opinions of online discussions. If you have any skills learned throughout the course, force them to make those connections. overall impressions, and we could definitely use this to improve our courses. And if you guys have any demonstrations and final demonstrations, I don't know if any of you actually have them reflect on a presentation that their peers did, or presenting their own. Maybe they're struggling with presenting, and this could be a great way for them to have that process and have those action steps. And again, we want to make sure that what lessons did they gain from their whole project? Actually, survival tips. This is a great way. Our students love to tell other students how they survived or didn't with the course. So maybe the reflection will be survival tips for the next group of students coming through. I wish they would have done. And that's a great technique as well. Group reflections, and I've heard during our discussion that, can we have this? Actually, yes. It's a wonderful way for students to think out loud and reorganize their thoughts and what they learned. And even if they don't get the feedback from their peers, that action alone, because they know somebody's going to be reading it, forces them to conceptualize the knowledge much better. What you can do is also provide a several group reflections do have some private space for students to be able to reflect on their own. And then you say, okay, you can post this, or you choose not to post this. This is going to be how you wish to do. So when the students reflect, they really compare those things and they go, oh, you learned that. I missed that. How did that? And again, survival memo works really well at the end of the course reflection if you want to have a group one. How did they successfully complete the course? How did they survive? What lessons did they learn and they would before they came? For reflection, and I have a lot more in a longer presentation, but I think all of us know about journaling. I think we've been doing a lot. So it is really effective in elaborating, documenting, rephrasing, and verbalizing. It is a way of thinking out loud without waiting for the peer, to give feedback and worrying about it. We can digitally archive their work. They can digitally archive their work. We can provide examples during the journaling and show students the changes that they actually made that they're not noticing from previous courses or how they started, and say, sometimes I go, I'm so proud of all your work and progress. And they're like, oh, that's nice, thanks. But I show them their first journal and say, let's go back to your first journal and compare it to your last one. Look at this progress. Look how proud, it's just amazing, the growth. They're like, yes, because they really do understand. So there's actually different types of journaling. We can have personal journals, dialogue journals, and highlighted journals. I personally do dialogue journals because that gives me that social emotional support that I'm striving for. And so the personal journals could be done weekly, submitted periodically. It's like, make it. This is your space, and I'm just kind of making sure you complete it, no red flags. Dialogue is when, as an instructor, I give back feedback. And with this one, I really like it because sometimes I just say, how did it go? How did this week go? We talked about you're having family issues and problems. How did it affect you? And it really, I feel much closer to my students when I give myself the flexibility, where the last question that I guide them with is, how did it go? Or what questions for the instructor, or questions do you have? What do you wish your instructor to know? And highlighted journal, if you have a lot of journaling and at the end you just like overwhelmed, what you can make students do is highlight for them something that directs directly to the concepts that you guys discussed. It makes it easier for the students and for the instructor at the end of the semester review have this type of journaling. And structure of journal entries, yes, we all have the description, but the second step should be, what new information or revised former information did you have? Your personal reflection and the action plan. I think that's the key that I'm missing. What is your action plan on this? And let's talk discussions. So again, reflective dialogue between their peers and between the instructor. Again, different perspectives. They can see things differently, ask different questions, challenge their own assumption. It does create knowledge and generalize accepted arguments, and definitely provides the think out loud for both parties. where they can do it. And I don't think there's anything wrong where you say, reflect on this and then justify your position and let them get into it and have a robust discussion. Well, this is right because, or this is not right because. It integrates and reorganizes knowledge. And again, based on what I'm teaching them. So the best practices for these, they must be purposeful and focused. This is where the prompts of questioning is so important. The topic has to be related to the learner's experiences, not just like, oh, discuss amongst yourself. I often felt my discussions were not engaging enough because the students were not involved. And design around an anchor such as a case or a question. Provide explicit scaffolding and encourage collaboration. So what's the mechanism for them? So let's say, give them the opportunity to revise and refine their comments. What's the mechanism? Second attempt, multiple attempts, timeline on where they can do it. And when I was preparing this presentation, a lot of the research I learned showed me that mandating citation and limiting length of posts can show a lower level of cognitive process. I am struggling with this because my class is on research methods where citation is everything, where I really need them to get into the habit of citing things. So for me, I might have to compromise and mandate citations simply because of that. But I might have some reflections that do not mandate citations. So I might go halfway on that. Or not to be, or better yet, should we use questions? I've every single way. I had journal entries with no prompts, journal entries with like answer these 3 questions, or pick from a bank of questions. I'm always trying to figure out what's the best way. So the research actually shows that students who do write with question prompts had a statistically significant higher reflection levels, more keywords, longer messages, higher comprehension. So prompts is a way to go. And thought-provoking questions help to identify those gaps and ties the subject to a real-world application. Basically, some of them like to go off on a tangent, and this can just like bring it back. Like, did you answer that question? And provokes learners to engage. I can attest to that. So we have different types of prompts. We can either do a sentence starter or a question. And I think it depends on the subject and how do you want the students to be, or where do you want to focus. So it does improve metacognition, and it focuses their attention and stimulates prior knowledge. And we have different categories of prompts. You can have problem solving or reflective prompts. So examples of different types of prompts, like a procedure prompt for specific task, or elaborative prompt where, okay, you know the foundational knowledge. How can we elaborate, or what's the meaning of it? Expand it. And reflective prompts. To do this task, my plan is to. So, and all of this can be under the umbrella of problem solving. And of reflective prompts, this is something we're more familiar with, self-reflection, where we pause the thinking process and say, okay, let me get my bearings before I dive too deep. Let me see what's really around. How is this whole picture fit in? And it teaches them to monitor their thinking process or justifying their decision and appraising different perspective, and evaluate an overall problem-solving process. So again, you can have any and all combinations of these. So this is an example, like what have you missed in your assignment, or what would you do differently if you could redo your assignment? I am a fan of those type of things. And a big question is, with all of this, is the essential question. The questions you should be asking should have these type of qualities. It should be open-ended, thought-provoking, higher order thinking, something inference, evaluation, prediction, analysis. It could be and may be transferable within or sometimes across disciplines. Leadership questions are great for this, like leaders in the healthcare field, are they different than leaders in this field, or what qualities are transferable from one field to the next? Raises additional questions, requires support and justifications, not just an answer, and recurs over time. So it should be revisited again and again. So I thought leadership was this in the beginning, and now I think it's this. For me, I thought vaccine creation process was this in the beginning, and the FDA approval versus this. And some examples, and it's great, and you don't have, there's so many of these online that you don't have to reinvent Just guys, so you know, if you're overwhelmed, internet's your friend sometimes. This is my favorite question. When I get students who get really down or get so into the minutiae of assignments and they're fighting for every period and comma and things like that, I love asking this question. Why are you here again? What is the purpose of you being in my class? What is the purpose of you being in this program? What is the purpose of you going into this field? And it really, again, focuses them back on the initial thing that they really want. They refocus their energy, and it works really well. And we can have that heart-to-heart conversation of, why are you here? So some reflection strategies. Aside from journal, we have great, this is kind of journaling next step. It's called layered text reflection. So basically think of journal with digital hyperlinks, which add layers to meaning and helps to see connections. And they can use any of the media, and with online environment, this is perfect for us, where they can use movie clips, poetry, recipes, whatever it is, even emojis, if anything, in their journaling. And I'll show you an example. And when I was doing this, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is perfect for something I have. This is, for example, an Underground Railroad, and the technology they're using is called Padlet, where they write their reflection and they showed you where they learned it from and what inspired them and where they're going to go next. So something we teach in my classes is the Tuskegee experiment. And so bringing it back to COVID, well, why would the population in Baltimore would be afraid of vaccinations and distrust the government? And let them explore the Tuskegee experiment and everything that followed with this type of layering, where they give me the movie clips, where they give me the actual documentation, give me the congressional reports, and then they reflect and go, I get it, I see, this is the entire picture. I get why there's mistrust. Okay, and now what? Okay, what? And keep going. And I thought this was like a really rich, brilliant way of doing journaling, where it's not just, this is what I learned, this is how I'm gonna do it. The other one, that a much more simpler way, is a 3-2-1 reflection. I think it's great for foundational classes. 3 things they know, 2 things they know they don't know, and 1 thing they're certain about a topic. So there's a variety of ways of doing this. For example, if it's in a module, 3 things you remember, 2 things of what you learned, and 1 question you have, or 3 important ideas, 2 things about working in groups, etc. So we can use the 3-2-1 model pretty much in any context. And again, it's a very guided way of giving them a reflection. So, questions that the group might have, and I'll stop the sharing somewhere around there.